Part 302. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3018. By Shandao, he has a good reputation in Qingzhou now, otherwise the county magistrate would not invite him. Although people are a little arrogant, those who have the ability have the qualifications to be arrogant. When we choose talents, we naturally have the right to choose. Just like them, they can choose to be loyal to the emperor, and they can also leave the seal at the same time, not to work for him. Zhou Man felt that it was reasonable, so he made up his mind, I'll go to invite him when I go to the office. What position do you think would be better for him? Bai Shan tilted his head slightly. Ancient medicine? Isn't there a shortage of an ancient medicine in your name? Zhou Man thought for a while and nodded, okay, I'll hire him to do the alchemy. Zhou Man also said to Wen Tiandong, you must rely more on him to build the other two medical offices. She said, you get along with him more, and in the end, it is up to you. Wen Tiandong understood what Zhou Man meant, opened his eyes slightly, and responded happily. Only then did Zhou Man go to see the young family with him. After most of the day, Wen Tiandong already had a treatment method in his heart, acupuncture, medicated compresses, and then combined with decoction. He showed Zhou Man the prescription and needle. After looking at it, Zhou Man nodded slightly, put down the prescription and said, I prescribe the same prescription as you, but the acupuncture and decoction are different. The two discussed the method of treatment, and after determining the three prescriptions, they looked at the woman lying on the bed. You are absolutely bedridden, I will teach you a few more movements, you can practice one every day. Practice, you can heal faster. The teenager on the side quickly asked, Sir, how long will it take to cure my mother's illness? Zhou Man thought for a while and said, at least 3 months, it depends on the situation. It's very difficult to completely heal. I can only say try to let her live like an ordinary person. But you need to pay more attention in your daily life, she said. Zhou Man turned his head to look at the woman, and said meaningfully, your body is yours, and your life is also yours. You should not do overwork like washing clothes during the confinement period. The woman said, it was the autumn harvest at that time, how could I do it if I didn't go to the ground? Zhou Man raised his eyebrows and asked, have you ever been to the ground in the past 4 years? The woman was dumbfounded. Zhou Mandao, in these 4 years, you are alive, and so are your children. The woman was speechless. Zhou Man turned his head and said to Bai Shan, education is not just about educating men not to beat their daughter-in-law's children, but also educating their daughter-in-law to be open. In fact, sometimes women are not as important as they think, and they are not as contemptible as they think. The woman lowered her head and did not dare to speak, but the boy and the little girl beside her were thoughtful. After deciding on the treatment plan, Zhou Man then said, you are ready, stay here after washing up, and I will give you acupuncture and medicine later. Only then did the woman return to her senses and hurriedly responded. Xiao Cao came to find the young man, the Lord asked you to go to the backyard to chop firewood and burn hot water. Your mother wants to wash your hair and take a bath. Do you have clean clothes? If not, we can lend you a set. The young man regained his senses and said quickly, yes, we brought it. Xiao Cao took him to the kitchen. Zhou Man went to the pharmacy to prepare the medicine, and the medicine had to be soaked. Bai Shan followed closely and asked, I have thought about the issue of indoctrination carefully, and I have been calling the district chiefs to the county for a meeting. The training, I think the effect is not bad, but the people are ignorant, and the actual goal is still far from what we want to achieve. Zhou Man asked while weighing the medicine, So I think our county government and your medical office should cooperate. Bai Shan said, look, now more and more patients come to your medical office to seek medical treatment, especially women. Didn't you want to organize women to teach? Do they have some basic medical principles? Why don't you educate them, by the way? Is that man uneducated? First and then again, he said, although the world always looks down on women, you can't deny that women make up half of the average family, and women's status is no less than men's in the upbringing of children. He gave an example, like your home. The children of the Zhou family are basically taught by the Qian family. Zhou Man poured the weighed medicine into the basin, raised his head proudly and said, "That's because my father is good. Those men beat their wives and children, and my father never did anything to my mother." Bai Shan looked at her quietly. Everyone grew up in Qilai village. In their spare time, they often squatted under the big banyan tree at the entrance of the village and listened to the old people gossip. Who doesn't know who? Zhou Man also looked at him quietly. In the end, she took a step back based on reality. Okay, my father has such a little problem, but my mother can train her. Old Zhou Tiou was lazy when she was young, and she was tired when she was young, but she would never take care of her body like a woman. How could she go to cold water and go to the ground to cut rice after only 3 days of giving birth? Qian's family gave birth several times later, and her mother-in-law was gone. Sometimes her mother-in-law's sister-in-law couldn't find time to help, so she pressed Lao's Hutu to take out the clothes and go out to wash. Bai Shan was waiting for her words. You also said that the mother-in-law will train, so it can be seen that the education of women is more important than that of men. Zhou Man rolled his eyes. It's not impossible, but the medical office is short of money. Bai Shan. He took a deep look at Zhou Man and waved his hand. It's okay, I'll call it for you. Zhou Man was excited and looked at him with bright eyes. Really? Bai Shan nodded twice. It's more real than gold. Is he short of money now? He is a county magistrate who only sold several carts of salt not long ago, and now there is more and more money piled up in the county government's warehouse. It's a pity that there is still a lot of salt piled up in the salt field, and it can't be sold for the time being, otherwise he can make more money. Bai Shanke said boldly, just say, I'll give you how much money you want. Zhou Man was stunned, and after a while, he said in a daze, the medical office in Qingzhou City will also be built. Bai Shan looked thoughtful. I can talk to County Magistrate Lu for you, or I can talk to Governor Guo. Zhou Man, stingy. Bai Shan, this is a clear distinction between public and private. This is their Bihai County Medical Office. No matter how much money they give, the people of Bihai County will benefit, but they invest in Qingzhou City Medical Office. Bai Shan coughed lightly and said as he stepped back, this is still called seeking political affairs in his position. Let's talk about it when I can manage Qingzhou City someday. Zhou Man silently watched him retreat, and when he reached the door, he raised his foot and stepped out. He turned around and slipped away. She snorted softly, took the basin to the back kitchen, took a medicine bag and stuffed the medicine in it, then handed it to Xiao Cao. Use a medium pot to boil the medicine. Yes. When Tiandong was recording the pulse case, and he particularly wanted to pierce this acupuncture by himself, but thinking of the woman's reaction, he sighed and handed the recorded pulse case to Zhou Man. Sir, I'll give you a shot. Zhou Man thought for a while and said, you can wait outside the window. You can listen to the patient's feedback. If you are in the room, just let the cakes help me. My throat is a little inflamed today, which may be due to the vaccination. I slept groggily for a day, so my condition is not very good. I will update 2 chapters today, and I will make up for it in 2 days. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3019. This time the acupuncture was different from the previous one. Zhou Man used several large needles and started to puncture the needles after applying the medicine bag to her. The patient felt a little uncomfortable when the first needle was inserted. Feeling bloated and painful, she couldn't help groaning. Zhou Man moved the needle and asked her how she felt. Wen Tiandong could hear clearly outside the window. He knew that Zhou Man's acupuncture practice today is not only for treatment, but also to investigate her physical condition. Each acupuncture point responds differently, and the lesions are naturally different. He squatted outside the window, listening to the voices inside and taking notes of the reactions, which they would discuss later. After the set of acupuncture, not only the patient was sweating profusely, but Joe Man was also sweating and was very tired. Joe Man looked at the time, half an hour, nearly a quarter of an hour longer than he expected. She frowned, and after closing the needle, she said to the little girl who was waiting beside her, "Wipe her off with a dry towel and let her rest." The woman has always been taken care of by her daughter. Although she is only 8 or 9 years old, she has been able to catch her outside the home. She responded and immediately took a dry towel and went to take care of her mother. Seeing Joe Man's tired expression, Zibing hurriedly stepped forward to support her. Seeing that her palms were a little cold, she couldn't help but be surprised. "Miss, are you unwell?" Joe Man also felt that she was a little flustered, and her eyes were a little flowery. She thought for a while and said, "It may be too hot, heat stroke." When Wen Tiandong, who was waiting outside, heard this, he immediately stepped forward, helped Joe Man to the next door, took her pulse, and took a closer look at her face. It was a little red, but it wouldn't be a heat stroke, right? But he still said to the cake, "Go and bring a bowl of summer soup." Joe Man said, "I don't want to drink Xiaxia soup, I want to drink sour plum soup." Wen Tiandong, "Okay." Because of the hot weather, many people came to the medical office to see a doctor. Some of them arrived after walking for a long time in the sun. Therefore, the medical office has been preparing Xiaxia soup since the beginning of summer, all of which are made with herbs such as Centella asiatica. The tea drink, although a bit bitter, has a good effect of cooling off. It's just that Joe Man doesn't like it, so sister he will cook some sour plum soup every day for them to bring over in May, just for them to cool off the heat, not much, most of them drink it closely to Joe Man first. Zibing ran to the kitchen to get sour plum soup. Wen Tiandong said, "Sir, do you still feel uncomfortable?" Joe Man thought for a while and said, "My heart is stuffy and my eyes are dizzy. Isn't this a heat stroke? Could it be a lack of qi and blood?" Joe Man was a little unconfident when she said this. She has been eating a lot recently. On such a hot day, she even drank a bowl of broth last night, and she didn't feel that her blood was wrong. Wen Tiandong, I mean, you, he paused, thinking that she was a doctor, and it seemed that there was no need to ask too much detail, so he asked directly, "Could you be pregnant?" Joe Man blinked, and pulled out his wrist to give himself a pulse. Wen Tiandong. Joe Man felt his pulse seriously, put down his hand after a while, and began to count his days. She was a little dizzy at this time, so she was a little dull, but no matter how dull she was, she could calculate it with her mind at this moment. It seemed that she was 3 days late, but this kind of thing is normal. For her, the time is not always accurate, sometimes 3 or 4 days early and 5 or 6 days late are normal. Joe Manho reacted with hindsight, "Keek, I won't really want to be a mother, will I?" This question was too important, and Keek was stunned for a while. He didn't even ask the host for points. He directly monitored her body data, and then silently pulled the data out and projected it in her mind. But because she was a little dizzy, she didn't watch it for a while. The Western cake brought up the sour plum soup. Joe Man took it in a daze, and drank it one by one. Wen Tiandong hesitated on the side. Joe Man drank a bowl of sour plum soup and felt much better, at least his head wasn't so dizzy, so he let out a breath. Wen Tiandong saw that her face had improved, and he couldn't help asking with concern, "Sir, are you pregnant?" Joe Man nodded, "The days are still light, don't tell anyone." Wen Tiandong, why is it that in such a shallow day, Mr. can feel the pulse by himself, but he can't be sure? Wen Tiandong deeply felt that his medical skills needed to be improved, but He looked at the bowl in Zhou Man's hand and said, "Sir, there is hawthorn in the sour plum soup, you can't drink more now." Zibing was stunned by the sight. She just went to the kitchen to bring a bowl of sour plum soup, and came back to hear such important news. She couldn't hold back for a while, and immediately reached out to grab the empty bowl in Zhou Man's hand, and wanted to cry a little. "Miss, do you want to spit it out?" "Zhou Man, it doesn't have to be like this. Although there is hawthorn in the sour plum soup, it's not much. It's fine to drink 1 or 2 bowls a day." She doesn't nibble on hawthorn every day, and she still has symptoms of heat stroke, so drinking a little is fine. Zibing looked at Ben Tiantong uncertainly. Wen Tiandong nodded, but warned again, "You can't drink too much." After thinking about it, he suggested, "You can make gruel and keep the rice soup for later use. If you are really thirsty, you can drink the rice soup. That can also cool off the heat." Zhou Man just pretended not to hear it. She rested for a while, but still felt amazing. Although she was a doctor, she still didn't get used to it. When Tiandong looked at it, decisively called Xiao Cao, and said to her, "Go to the county government to find the magistrate Bai, and ask him to pick up the adults." Xiao Cao widened his eyes and asked, "What's wrong with your lord?" It's hard to tell others about a short pregnancy, so when Tiandong didn't tell Xiao Cao, but said, "Just go and say that Lord Zhou is not feeling well." When Xiao Cao heard this, he ran to the county office. It wasn't long before Bai Shan returned to the county office. Zhou Man got a needle, and he was a little bored staying there, so he went back to the county office. It's just that the county government is fine now, so he called Kui Yuan and asked him, "How is the information I asked you to inquire about?" Kui Yuan, "Sir, do we really want to rob people from other counties?" "What is robbing people? We call it attracting talents." "A group of refugees and tenant farmers, what kind of talent is this?" But he still said, "I have quietly followed the instructions of the adults to confuse people. Oh no, it is to persuade people to go, but the homeland is difficult to leave, although it is separated by a county or several counties, but if you want to attract people to come here it's not easy either." Bai Shan smiled slightly and encouraged, "It's okay, let's take it slow, now we have money." Being rich is one of Bai Shan's greatest strengths. Although Bihai County and the county government office are still in tatters, in fact, the county government has a lot of money in stock, especially since he is still expanding his official salt business. Just as he was about to speak, Daji came quickly, stood outside the door and bowed, "Lord, Xiao Cao from the medical department is here, saying that the lady is a little unwell." Bai Shan's expression changed, and he immediately got up and went out. "Why do you feel uncomfortable?" That was the medical department. Zhou Man himself was a doctor, and Wen Tiandong was there too. Bai Shan hurried to the medical office. "I slept all day today. I was super sleepy and very hungry. No matter how long I slept, I didn't get enough food. Besides worrying about gaining weight, I was looking forward to the second injection. I felt good after eating and sleeping." Ah. See you at 10 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3020. When Bai Shan ran to the hospital, Zhou Man was sitting and eating snacks. After drinking the sour plum soup, she suddenly felt hungry. She was still very hungry. The kitchen didn't have time to cook for her, so she took the snacks. Chew up. But this didn't seem to make her feel full, so when she saw Bai Shan, she immediately stuffed the remaining half of the snack into her mouth and stood up. "Let's go home and eat." Bai Shan subconsciously raised his head and glanced at the big sun in the sky. "Is it a little too early to eat dinner now?" Wen Tiandong hurriedly said, "Sir, you can go back, I'll be watching from the medical department." Bai Shan looked at Zhou Man up and down and felt that she seemed to be in good spirits, so he was a little puzzled, but he still stepped forward to support her. Are you unwell? Ah, Zhou Man dragged him out. I'll tell you when I get back. Bai Shan followed her home in confusion. As soon as he got home, Zhou Man exhaled and said to Mei, I'm hungry, go to the kitchen to see what to eat. Entering the room, Bai Shan felt that her mood was a little off, so he stared at her. What happened? Zhou Man sat on the couch, rubbed his neck, looked at Bai Shan awkwardly and said, that is, you are going to be a father. Bai Shan widened his eyes. Zhou Man waited for his response. Bai Shan's eyes slowly landed on her stomach, he swallowed, and walked slowly to her side and sat down next to her, his eyes still fixed on her. Zhou Manbian also turned his head to look at him. Seeing that he didn't speak for a long time, he reached out and waved in front of him. Didn't you react? Bai Shan stretched out his hand to grab her, put it on his knee and said softly, I know, you wait for me to take it easy. Zhou Man just sat and waited for him to relax, feeling that he was too hot next to him, so he wanted to withdraw his hand and sit aside, but Bai Shan grabbed her hand tightly. Don't move, I have to take it easy. Zhou Man. Bai Shan took a stick of incense to accept that he was going to be a father. In this stick of incense, he not only thought about what to do and what would happen in the next year, but also about the child's growth and study after birth to adulthood. And then he couldn't think of any further places. Bai Shan stretched out his hand to wipe the sweat from his forehead, turned his head and asked Zhou Man, are you feeling any discomfort now? Zhou Man shook his head, I had some heat stroke just now, but it's better now. Bai Shan frowned slightly, it's too hot, you're applying medicine and needles in the house, it's hotter than outside with the wind blowing. Because many patients in the medical department are women now, they will definitely not accept Wen Tiandong's needles, so Bai Shan waited and said, I'll go back and send you some ice. Zhou Man, where did you get the ice? Bihai County is not the capital. There is no ice seller in the entire county, and there are no merchants selling ice. Bai Shan said, I'll ask someone to buy it from Qingzhou City. He squeezed Zhou Man's hand and asked, what else do you want to eat? I'll ask someone to buy it for you. Zhou Man wanted to say a lot of things, but when he came to the end, he suddenly didn't want to eat. I want to eat noodles and porridge. It's a very simple recipe. You don't have to go to Qingzhou City. Now Bai Shan can ask the kitchen to make it for her. The kitchen quickly brought a bowl of noodles. Because it was hot, Zhou Man didn't like too greasy, so he put some chopped green onion, beat an egg and 2 greens. Zhou Man was eating with relish, and Bai Shan sat opposite her with his chin propped up and watched her eat. She looked up at him, pushed the bowl towards him, and Bai Shan reached out and pushed it back. You eat, I'm not hungry yet. Zhou Man hurriedly ate it all by himself. Bai Shan propped his chin up and watched her eat with relish. Zhou Man wiped his mouth and asked, how long will it take for you to return to normal? Bai Shan asked her, are you ready to be a mother now? Zhou Man shook his head and looked at him in a daze. Although Bai Shan's medicine had expired long ago, he didn't take any more medicine, and Zhou Man didn't mention it anymore. The two of them could be considered as letting nature take its course, but no matter how natural it was, when the baby was really conceived, the two of them would still be the same. Somewhat confused, Zhou Man reached out and touched his still unresponsive stomach, and muttered, it's weird. Bai Shan also thought it was strange, but he felt that he accepted it well. He said, we are all ignorant, so we have to write a letter home and ask my grandmother to send us 2 people. Zhou Man blinked, I'm a doctor, I should be sensible. Bai Shan shook his head, you still have to manage the medical office, how can you have that energy? You still need someone to take care of you at home. He knew that it was impossible for Zhou Man to give up the medical department, and now is also a critical time for the development of the medical department, and people's mental strength is limited. Bai Shan decided directly, I will write to my grandmother at night. Okay, Joe Man didn't insist too much either, it's nice to have an adult by his side. The two continued to face each other in a daze. May didn't know what was going on. Seeing that there was no movement in the room for a long time, he glanced at the head and saw that the master and the wife were smirking at an empty bowl, so they retracted their heads and pulled the cake. Going to the side and talking, what happened to the master and the lady? The speed of accepting the cake was much faster than them. After all, she was not pregnant, and the bystanders had a very clear mind, but she also remembered what Master Wen said, the days are still short, and not too many people can know about it, so she looked around and lowered her head. The voice said, I tell you, don't tell anyone else. May, okay, let's talk about it first. Zibing whispered in her ear, my lady is pregnant. May took a step back and looked at her silently. Zibing looked back at her in confusion, what I said is true, it was made by the lady herself, not my nonsense. May nodded her forehead and said, are you stupid? You can't say this kind of thing, but we are the people who serve you personally. We have to take good care of the lady. Can we hide such a thing from us? May turned around and went into the house to clean up the dishes, and then said to the two masters who were still looking at each other and giggling, Miss, the kitchen has hot water, do you want to take a shower and change now? Joe Man was sweating just now and was really uncomfortable, so he nodded. Someone interrupted, and Bai Shan also recovered. After thinking about it, he said to May, let the kitchen make some light meals at night. May smiled and replied, yes. So in the kitchen, and Julan also knew about Joe Man's pregnancy, everyone was beaming, but no one dared to say it. The days are still light, and everyone can't talk about it, so the joy is temporarily suppressed in my heart. Bai Shan seriously wrote a letter to his family and gave it to Daji, let Lu Gui send someone to send it back. Daji responded, hesitated for a while and then asked, Lord, will I follow you or my wife in the future? Follow Man Bao, Bai Shan said, I'll pick 2 more guards to take with me, and you will follow Man Bao in the future. He is still the most at ease. Daji responded, turned around and went out to deliver the letter. Continue to a chapter. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3021. Joe Man and Bai Shan were lying side by side on the bed, and the two touched Joe Man's belly. Although they didn't feel anything now, they were also imagining with great interest the prenatal education that would be carried out when the child was older. Joe Man thought that she couldn't sleep, after all, she had a big event like pregnancy, but with her head resting on the pillow, she fell asleep after talking to Bai Shan after a few words. Bai Shan was left alone, unable to sleep. He raised his head and looked at her, and when he saw her breath slowly and steadily growing, he knew that she was asleep. Bai Shan reached out and touched her forehead and hair, feeling a little sweaty, so he took a palm fan and gently fanned her. Joe Man slept more deeply, turned over to face Bai Shan, and got closer to the wind source. Bai Shan straightened her hair and gently fanned the fan. Bai Shan didn't sleep for almost one night, and he didn't know why he couldn't sleep. Anyway, he kept cooling Joe Man. He might feel cold in the middle of the night, so he woke up and covered her stomach, woke up and slept again, slept and woke up again, like this repeatedly. Although he was in good spirits at night, he was a little sleepy in the morning. But he didn't stay in bed. After getting up, he went to fight a set of punches. After exercising, he sweated all over, and his spirit was better. Joe Man slept well last night and was in good spirits today, so he went to eat breakfast after doing a set of self-cultivation boxing as usual. Follow the two. Joe Man couldn't help but stop, turned his head and said to Bai Shan, it's okay to follow Daji, why do you want to send me? Bai Shan, let's take a walk after dinner, just in time to digest. You don't go to the yamen. It's still early, and the medical office is not far away. I'll take you back in time, Bai Shan urged her. Let's go and see how many patients there are today. Not many patients came to the hospital today, but there was one more person who wanted to stay in the hospital. As soon as Wen Tiandong saw Zhou Man, he stopped her and said, "There is a patient who has a long-term cough, and it seems to be tuberculosis. Sir, this patient asked me to see, you better not go." Zhou Man's eyes brightened. She had tuberculosis. She had not yet diagnosed and treated patients with this condition. She asked, "Where did you arrange it?" "In the farthest corner of the backyard, people even live in." Zhou Man raised his foot and went there. Wen Tiandong hesitated to say anything, and couldn't help but look at Bai Shan. Bai Shan didn't stop her, but just warned, "Be careful, do you have a mask at your medical office?" "Don't worry, since the outbreak of smallpox in Xiazhu, all the medical offices around the country have been stocking the anti-epidemic items." Bai Shan didn't go in, he nodded and said, "I'll bring you something to eat at noon." Zhou Man waved his hand and told him to go back to the county office to do his own thing. She went to the pharmacy first, put on a mask and gloves, and then went to see the patient with Ben Tiandong. Wen Tiandong also put on something, and introduced to her, "It's a 38-year-old man, surnamed Sun, with a thin build. He has been coughing intermittently for 3 years. Recently, he has been coughing up a little blood. That's why he thought it was tuberculosis, but he had seen few symptoms and had never seen such a patient, so he wasn't sure." "Zhou Man, who sent it?" "His wife and children. The 3 people were sent by a scooter. Because their home was far away, they had to travel for 2 full days to arrive. There was also a rain yesterday. Although they avoided it in time, the 3 of them were a little embarrassed. They saw that Master Wen brought a woman with extraordinary temperament over. Although the other party was covering his face, they still stood up from the ground. Stood a little cramped." Zhou Man nodded to them, pushed open the door and went in to see the patient. "This is also a ward. There are still 4 small beds in it. At this time, there is only one person lying on the bed. Obviously, his family also knows that the disease will be contagious, so they deliberately avoid it. However, because the doctor came, the family of 3 still followed into the house. Zhou Man did not let them approach, but went to the bedside to see the patient. The patient was already asleep, but woke up when he heard the movement, and immediately got up and got out of bed. Zhou Man didn't stop him, but just saw him stand up, and after sizing up his figure, he nodded slightly and asked him to lie back. Wen Tiandong brought a pulse pillow, placed it under the patient's hand, and then moved a chair for Zhou Man to sit on. He and his family of 4 introduced, "This is the order of our medical department, Sir Zhou." The 4 of them were immediately excited when they heard it. They came for Zhou Man. Before they came, they heard a lot of people talking about Zhou Man, saying that she was an imperial doctor or a genius doctor in the capital, who could treat the emperor and the queen. The 4 of them looked at her with bright eyes, and even the patient who was ashes couldn't help asking, "Sir, can my illness be cured?" Zhou Man withdrew his hand, asked him carefully about the process of his illness and the situation in the past few years, then shook his head and said, "It's not easy to cure, but we will try our best." The 4 of them were a little disappointed when they heard it, but there was some expectation in the disappointment. Zhou Man got up and left. Wen Tiandong had already diagnosed him before, so he stopped taking his pulse and left with Zhou Man directly. Avoiding the Sun family, Zhou Man said, "It's tuberculosis." Wen Tiandong couldn't help sighing and asked, "What soup recipe should I use?" Zhou Man thought for a while and then said, "Don't we have Panax nodo ginseng for nourishing deficiency and cultivating phlegm and treating tuberculosis and killing insects? It is used with asparagus, Ophiopogon japonicus, Remmenia glutinosa, Chuan fritillaria." She and Wen Tiandong discussed the prescription, and after making a decision, She prescribed it. Do their families have to stay here to take care of the patients? It doesn't cost much. The situation of the Sun family is better, but it is also a lower household. After discussion, they decided to leave their daughter to take care of the sick, while the young man went home with his mother. The family is about to harvest in autumn, and there is still a lot of work to do in the fields. Joe Man asks Xiao Cao to send a set of protective medical supplies to the girl. Be careful, you can't go wrong, let her go in and out of the room to protect herself. Xiao Cao responded, still a little worried, Sir, do they also eat in the kitchen? Seeing her worries, Joe Man smiled and said, prepare him a pair of bowls and chopsticks for use alone, plus a pair of public bowls and chopsticks, and it doesn't need to be so arrogant. It was arranged that this patient Joe Manke went to the front yard to see other people who came to seek medical treatment. Now that the medical department is well known, some sick people in the city will also come here to seek medical treatment, especially those from poor families who don't mind the long queues to get to them. Fortunately, most people's illnesses are minor illnesses, and they can just go back and eat after prescribing prescriptions and taking medicines. It doesn't take long. Joe Man finished it before noon. She had nothing to do, so she took out a medical book to read. Wen Tiandong knew that Joe Man would read medical books in his spare time at the medical office, so he didn't bother her, and he also found a place to learn from yesterday's prescription and pulse case deduction. When Mingda and Bai Erlang arrived, it was a rare quiet time in the medical office. The yard was empty, only a few chirps came from the trees, and it seemed that no one was there. It is rare to see such a quiet medical office, so Mingda curiously went to find Joe Man, and saw that she was leaning on a reclining chair under the porch, holding a book in her hand, and Zibing was standing beside him with a big fan. Fan her lightly. See you at 7 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3022. Mingda couldn't help laughing. You are quite comfortable. Joe Man put down the book and asked with a smile, why did you come here on such a hot day? Bai Erlang asked Zibing to get 2 more palm fans, and he took the whirring fan and said, Mingda has a bad appetite recently, I don't know if it's a bitter summer, so I came to see you. Qingzhou is indeed a little hotter than the capital. But Bai Erlang does not regret coming, there is the sea here. He said, if it is a bitter summer, we plan to move to the seaside. The windy areas near the sea should be cooler. Joe Man, where do you live? Let's build a thatched house, clean it up, and it's fun to live in, Bai Erlang said very casually. I told Bai Shan that I want to buy a piece of land in Longqi. Don't you want to build a wharf in Longqi? When the time comes, a yard will be built there, and we can live there when we come back. He was also very generous, I'll leave you a yard at that time. Joe Man was very skeptical, can you guys come again next year? Bai Erlang and Mingda looked at each other, and Mingda said, it should be okay to work hard. Bai Erlang is even more bachelor, I'll go out to Qingzhou if it's a big deal. Joe Man was expressionless, what position did you hold in Qingzhou? Bai Erlang touched his chin and said, it's better to take a leisurely job. What do you think about the doctor in the county school or the prefectural school? Not to mention Joe Man, even Mingda couldn't help but say, don't mistake your children. Bai Erlang, how did he mislead the children? The cakes brought not only the palm fan, but also Joe Man's medicine box. Because it was cooler under the corridor, they didn't bother to move, so they consulted under the corridor. Joe Man saw that Mingda's face was not bad, so he felt that Bai Erlang's statement that she was bitter in summer was just an excuse, and it was obviously an excuse to go to the beach to play. She held down her pulse, lowered her eyes and listened, slightly surprised. She raised her eyes to look at Mingda, closed her eyes slightly, and listened carefully to her pulse. After a long while, she opened her eyes and looked at her with a gaze that she couldn't describe. Mingda blinked and asked her, what's wrong? Joe Man, are you late for your period? The palace maid behind him immediately bowed and replied, "It's 7 days late, and I was thinking that if I didn't come today, I would also come to see Lord Zhou. Mingda's health is not good. It used to be common for 2 to 3 months late, but in the past 2 years, she has basically improved, but her cycle will still be longer than others. On this basis, 3 to 5 days late is more common." Zhou Man withdrew his hand, pondered for a while, but still couldn't hold back, and called Keek excitedly in his heart, "Are you sure that Mingda is pregnant? Keek, are you sure about the host?" "Sure." Keek deducted a point, and then scanned Mingda in front of her. Instead of telling her the answer directly, she displayed the image in front of her. Zhou Man naturally knows how to read it. She understood it at a glance. She was so surprised that she clenched Mingda's hand tightly. In the eyes of Bai Mingda, and others, Zhou Man was stunned for a while after getting the answer from the palace maid, and then looked at Mingda with bright eyes. Bai Erlang felt that his heart was beating a little faster. He pulled her hand away from Mingda's hand, and then took Mingda's hand by himself. Don't be surprised, you can tell me if there is anything." Zhou Man looked around, determined that there were only a few of them here, and then affirmed, "Mingda is pregnant." Bai Erlang and Mingda widened their eyes together. Mingda couldn't help covering her heart with her hands. "Really?" Zhou Man nodded fiercely, "It really can't be more true." Bai Erlang was stunned, and it took a long while before he regained his senses. "Oh my God, I'm going to be a father." This was a bit sudden, and he wasn't mentally prepared yet. Mingda's first thought turned out to be, "Then we don't have to go back to the capital." Bai Erlang was stunned for a moment, and immediately said after reacting, "I will ask someone to find a craftsman to build a house tomorrow." "Zhou Man, you have to write to the family and the palace. Tell the family and the palace what?" Bai Shan He Wu came in carrying the food boxes, and seeing that they were all sitting under the porch, he said, "You guys will find a place. I brought the food. Do you want to eat here, or to the dining room?" When Bai Erlang saw him, he stepped on the railing and jumped from the porch to him, excitedly beat his chest, and shouted happily, "What do you eat now? I'm going to be a father, you know. I'm going to be a dad." Bai Erlang happily pinched his waist and laughed. Mingda couldn't help but pursed his lips and smiled. Bai Shan looked at him blankly, and after a while he clenched his fists and returned him vigorously, "What a coincidence, I'm going to be a father too." Bai Erlang's smile stopped for a while. He looked at Bai Shan blankly, and then turned to look at Zhou Man in the corridor. Zhou Man nodded with a smile. Mingda was also stunned for a moment, then took Zhou Man's hand in surprise and said, "You are also pregnant?" Zhou Man nodded fiercely, but felt a little regretful. "It's a while later than you." She calculated the time and said, "It shouldn't exceed 10 days. Not to mention that De was surprised, even the palace maid was very surprised, and said with a smile, "Then the princess should just follow the way of Lord Zhou to raise the baby." Zhou Man herself is an imperial physician. Is there anyone who knows what pregnant women should and should not do better than her? Just follow her. Zhou Man did not refuse, and said to Mingda, "But you still need 1 or 2 experienced people to take care of you. Do you want to come with 2 maids at home?" She said, "We wrote a letter last night to ask for someone. Has the letter been sent out now?" Zhou Man looked at Bai Shan. "Bai Shandao, the letter was delivered to Lu Gui. I'll have someone go again in a while and let him send it later. When you guys have written the letter, send it back together." Bai Erlang is also a little worried about himself. After all, they are really inexperienced, so we really won't go back to Beijing. Mingda was also a little hesitant. "I won't go back, doesn't it mean that you can't go far when you are pregnant? Qingzhou is so far from the capital." Zhou Man waved his hand, "If you don't return, your majesty will not urge you. Then write to someone." His majesty really wouldn't urge him. When he received the letter, he was shocked, and then his eyes were red. He grabbed Gu Zhong and said, Mingda, my Mingda is going to be a mother. Gu Zhong was overjoyed and immediately congratulated the emperor. Congratulations to your majesty, congratulations to your majesty is going to be a grandfather again. But after the emperor was excited, he was worried, but she's in Qingzhou now, there's nothing to want over there, and we're not around, how can this be okay? He added, if I knew earlier, I wouldn't let them go out. Gu Zhong immediately appeased the emperor, your majesty forgot, Lord Zhou is in Qingzhou. Speaking of safety, is there a safer place than being by Lord Zhou's side? After thinking about it, the emperor felt a little better. He read the letter carefully and said, they also know the importance. If you ask me if I want people, and I want to build a house, then I have to send them some craftsmen, right? Now, has the person dispatched by the prince to Qingzhou left? Gu Zhong, should we be in Qingzhou by now? The emperor was a little disappointed, and he couldn't make it in time. See you at 10:30. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3023. The Bai family was also looking at the letter written by Bai Shan, and Mrs. Lu couldn't help but stand up not long after she opened the letter. Zheng Shi couldn't help but look up, what's wrong? Madame Lu couldn't help but patted her chest and said, immeasurable heavenly venerate, it's a happy event, a big happy event, Man Bao is pregnant. Zheng's eyes widened, and he hurriedly read the letter together. Madame Lu and the others were overjoyed when they heard the words, and immediately congratulated loudly, congratulations to the old lady, congratulations to the madam. The Bai family was beaming with joy. Madame Lu couldn't help but narrow her eyes and said happily, the days are short, we can't talk about this matter, just the few of us know it. By the way, I have to tell my relatives, Wen Zishan and the others went to Qingzhou before. It's too troublesome to dislike people, so I only brought them a few servants. Among them, sister he is a bit more sensible, but I'm afraid that there are not many treasures yet, so I will send her and them too. Mrs. Lu looked at Madame Lu. She wanted her to go, but she was unwilling, so she looked at Mrs. Zheng, do you want Zishan and them? Would you like to visit them? Zheng's eyes lit up, can I? Mrs. Lu smiled and said, of course it is possible. You are their mother. It just so happens that one of them is busy with the county government and the other with the medical office. You can also help them in the past. Of course, Zheng can't take care of people, but the people around Zheng can. Mrs. Lu smiled and said, this time I bring Lang Xiang and He with me. He is Zheng's dowry girl, and her children are not too young. She has long been a housekeeper, mainly to manage Zheng's dowry. Among the big girls that Zheng's dowry, she is the one who is still by her side. The others are either going back to take care of Zhuangzi or marrying out, and the Lotus and Lotus left behind are very capable. Lang Xiang was given to her by Mrs. Lu after she got married and she has been serving her closely. Now, she is married and has a child. The big girl around Zheng's has changed twice, but Lang Xiang has been by her side, giving her she takes care of the house. Mrs. Lu smiled and said, Lang Xiang has learned how to take care of pregnant women, and she has also learned cooking with Aunt Rong, and she has watched Man Bao grow up. You bring her, and Man Bao will become more familiar with him. Zheng Shi thought it was true, and nodded again and again, I listened to my mother. I have to tell my in-laws, I don't know if my in-laws will call someone over there. The Zhou family was also pleasantly surprised when they heard the good news. The old Zhutu walked around the yard twice and asked the Qian family, should we go and have a look? Qian Shi also clenched his fists in surprise, but when Lao Zhutu asked her, he calmed down, shook his head and said, what can we do? Man Bao and the others have to devote their energy to take care of us, and the in-laws are going, we will go again. Go, if there is a conflict, does Manbeo listen to us, or listen to the other side? Qingzhou and Beijing are different. I heard that they live in the backyard of the county government. The yard is not big. It is not as big as the capital here. One side of the family has a single door. Home, so there is no contradiction, but it seems close. When I went there, I looked up and didn't look down, let alone my in-laws. It was her, who was always angry when she saw Lao's Hutu who was lazy, so she didn't go. But Qian thought for a while, asked the old folks to see if she would like to go there. Manbao is pregnant, and her taste may change. She grew up eating her sister-in-law's food, and the food in Qingzhou may not be right. Her taste, let her take care of it for a while. Little Qian is naturally willing. If it was before, she might be afraid of going far, but with the experience from Qilai village to the capital, she is not very afraid of going to a strange place again. Qian, she told her, when you get there, you can take care of Manbao's diet, and she will come back when she has a baby. Mr. Qian responded. Mrs. Lu heard that Xiao Qian was going to follow the Zhou family, and she knew that she was going for Manbao's food, so she said to Zheng, when you get to the kitchen over there, try to leave it to your in-law's sister-in-law. Fortunately, you get along well too. Mrs. Zheng has a good temper, and Mrs. Qian is also good-natured. Not to mention the few years they lived together, even when they were in Qilai village, the two of them had a good relationship. Mrs. Lu didn't worry about them, not to mention Bai Shan and Zhou Man. Here I am. You are all female relatives. It's inconvenient to follow the guards. I asked Zhuang Tiou to bring some people over to take you there. The caravan at home happened to be walking there. The autumn harvest is coming, maybe it's good to do some business. After Mrs. Lu made arrangements, she talked to the Zhou family. Zhou Dalan and his son, who were busy with the autumn harvest, rushed back and brought back a carload of rice seeds. Zhou Lizhong excitedly said to Xiao Qian, Mother, the rice seeds that my sister planted for me have finally been planted. This is Ding 2333. Seed, this is XIN 212 seed, the yield of Ding 233 seed is 7 stones this year, and XIN 212 has 6.5 stones. Little Qian didn't react much, and said, don't the seeds your sister-in-law give you often produce high yields? But you can't keep them. After so many years, she was used to it. Manbeo will send batches of seeds to Datu every 3 or 4 months. In the past few years, a batch of rice has even yielded 10 stones. The yield per mu is 10 stones. When they said it, the father-in-law almost went crazy. As a result, the sister-in-law was stunned to plant 1 mu in the second year. As a result, the best seeds they left behind and the rice planted in the second year were sparse. Not to mention that compared to the previous year's 10 stones, even their old seeds yielded less than 2 or 3 stones per mu, and they were especially attracted to insects. This kind of thing happens often, and the small Qian family also knows that the rice seeds that Manbeo wants them to plant should be kept and the yield will be stable. The little Qian family was calm, and Zhou Dalan explained for his son, this seed number 2, 3, and 3 is already the seed for the third year. Last year's harvest was even lower, with only 6 stones and 7. It is normal to weigh more than 1 kilogram, Li Zhong said. This kind of seed has been planted for 3 years since he got it, and the seed should be considered stable by now. It's the XINER number 2 seed. Zhou Dalan turned to look at the sack on the car and said, this kind of seed has only been planted for 2 years. According to Manbao, it will have to be planted for another year to confirm, but this is already the case. The seeds are left, you can bring them to them first, and see if they can plant them in Qingzhou. Zhou Lizhong nodded again and again. Last time my aunt wrote back and asked me to save her seeds. My uncle has also set up a test field in Qingzhou, and the seeds will be tested next year. He handed a booklet to his mother and said with a smile, "Mother, this is the record of the seeds of Ding 233 and Xin 212. I copied it out separately, and you give it to my sister-in-law. See you tomorrow." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3024. Old Jotio Yu, who was sitting on the sidelines and listening to them, didn't quite understand it, so he asked the result directly. "So this kind of seed will be able to produce 6 or 7 stones in the future?" "Not necessarily," Zhou Lizhong said, keeping in mind his aunt's words, "but the seeds have not changed much now. Let's leave them to my aunt first. I think these seeds will be used in the fields of work and at home next year." Although he planned to do so, he still wanted to hear his aunt's opinion. Mr. Qian responded. Guanyang on the side was not as bland as the others. He knew what this represented, so he was so surprised that he didn't speak for a long time. "When I came back to my senses, the family had already covered all the seeds on the cart with tarpaulins, and they only had to put on a mule or a donkey on the day they went out, and then they would be able to leave." Seeing that the family members were so ordinary, Guanyang couldn't help but ask Zhou Leixin, "Isn't such an important matter not reported?" Zhou Leixin was stunned and asked, "Who do you report to?" "Of course it is reported to Sinong Temple. If it is possible, it is also possible to report such a major matter directly to His Majesty. Their family is not without access." Zhou Leixin looked at her elder brother. Zhou Lizhong covered the seeds, clapped his hands, and said indifferently when he heard the words, "It's still early. My sister-in-law said before that it's fine if you don't do it. If you want to do it, you can report it over there. He said, we have to wait for us to plant it on a large scale at the earliest and report it after confirming that there is no problem with the yield per mu." Guanyang breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that they had plans, and then thought of something, smiled and said to Zhou Li, "Big brother can go to work according to this." Zhou Li scratched his head. "My aunt asked me to go back to the county seat to examine the officials, but He always felt that he could not pass the exam. Guanyang thought for a while and then said, "Try first, it doesn't matter if you don't pass the test. My grandfather's name has a recommended place. If my eldest brother fails the test, maybe I can ask my grandfather for help." Old Zhutu couldn't help getting up from the small stool beside him, his eyes narrowed with laughter. "I'm so embarrassed, Dalin, when you go home, you must bring some good wine for your in-laws." Zhou Dalin responded. The old Zhutu only felt refreshed. Although Zhou Lixiu and Zhou Ligu were both working in the family now, he was still a little worried because he had been following his father to farm in Zhuangzi. Zhou Lizhong is the eldest son and eldest grandson, and the Zhou family will definitely be passed on to him in the future. Several of his younger brothers and sisters have great prospects, and he is the only one who farms. Moreover, the grandson's daughter-in-law has become more and more capable in the hospital. Lao Zhou said nothing, but in his heart he also felt that the eldest grandson seemed a little unworthy of others, so he was always very good to Lu Sunyang. If he could also eat official food, even if he is not an official, but an official, he will not be so guilty. Guanyang and the old Jotio Yu said, "Grandfather, the eldest brother has such a feat, it would be a pity if he did not serve." The old Zhutu didn't understand what achievements Zhou Lizhong had, but what the grandson-in-law said was what he said, so he just nodded. On the other hand, Mr. Zhuang, who had also packed up some things to bring to his apprentice, came to hear it, and said to the old Zhutu and the Jian family, "The matter of the experimental field and the yield per mu must also be kept secret. In China and the DPRK, in the end, the tenant farmers don't have to say much." Because it was Mr. Zhuang who spoke, the old Zhou family became a little more solemn. "They don't know much," Zhou Lizhong said. Although they were asked to harvest, they all know the length of the rice ears in the experimental fields, but they also see the conditions of the experimental fields every year. Knowing that this year is the case, the next year not necessarily, and they don't know the exact volume. Except for Zhou Lizhong, no one knew which experimental field was planted for the first time, the second time, or the third time. Even as more and more seeds need to be planted, the number of experimental fields is also increasing. Even Zhou Dalin, who did it himself, sometimes can't remember it, so Zhou Lizhong, he marked each field, and made each field in detail. With records, only he and his booklet can fully remember the condition of each field. Mr. Zhuang naturally knew the general situation of the experimental field in Pu village. He nodded with satisfaction and said to Zhou Li, "When the autumn harvest is over, you can go back to Lujiang County to prepare for the exam." Zhou Lizhong, so fast. Mr. Zhuang touched his chin and said, "You can ask your aunt." Zhou Lizhong turned his head to look at his father and mother, and suddenly felt a little nervous, and then he didn't want to go back. What should I do? He swallowed. Mr. Zhuang seemed to see that he was afraid of the exam, so he said, "I'll go back and give you a few papers, you can try it out." Not to mention the olds Hutu, Zhou Dalin and Xiao Qian saluted Mr. Zhuang gratefully, and then pressed Zhou Lizhong to kowtow to Mr. Zhuang. Although Zhou Lizhong didn't want to take the exam in his heart, he knew that Mr. Zhuang was doing it for his own good, so he knelt down with a bitter face and gave Mr. Zhuang a kowtow. Mr. Zhuang quickly helped the person up and said with a smile, "Why do you have to be so polite? Get up quickly." Within 2 days, the Zhou family and the Bai family were ready, and they were escorted by a group of households to Qingzhou. It was not long before they left the capital, and they encountered a team of the imperial court, followed by a lot of caravans. Everyone took a long time. The Bai family is not good enough to walk on the same official road. Zheng Shi lifted the curtain and glanced at it, asking people to go up and find out what team it was. The housekeeper went, and ran back after a while and said happily, "Madam, it is the one sent by your majesty to the princess concubine, and he is also going to Qingzhou, which happens to be on the same road as us. In this way, they can always walk behind them, and there are people from the court ahead to open the way, and the road will be much safer." Someone came to inquire about the news, but naturally they couldn't hide it from the guards and chamberlains in the team. After a little inquiries, I heard that it was Lord Zhou's mother-in-law who was also going to Qingzhou. Immediately, the chambermaid and palace maids came over to greet him, and by the way, he invited people to the team. In the middle, the two teams combined into one team and went to Qingzhou together. Naturally, Zhou Man and Bai Shan, who were far away in Qingzhou at this time, didn't know anything. They were in the county government office to meet the people who had just been sent by the prince. The prince agreed to send a team of soldiers to Bai Shan. The relationship between everyone and the salt field was very important. The prince naturally couldn't transfer troops from him at will, so he directly transferred them from Jiangyi. However, the transfer of troops from Jiangyi had to be approved by Yin Li and the emperor. He was outside again at this time, and it was difficult to send letters back and forth, so when transferring people, he sent letters back and forth several times before the emperor agreed. They were also familiar with Bai Shan, the person who was transferred over. It was Nai Shenjun who escorted them to the western regions. Of course, he is no longer in the army, but a guerrilla general. Speaking of which, he escorted them to the back and forth attack in the western regions, and his achievements in participating in the western expedition, which made him rise so fast. He was ambitious to go to the next level in the capital, and as a result, he was transferred to Qingzhou. When he saw Bai Shan, he wanted to cry or not to cry, to laugh or not to go up to hug him, slap him vigorously by the way, and said loudly, "Good boy, you are still amazing, one sentence makes me run thousands of miles." Coming. Do you know that he has managed to get through the relationship with ease, and he will be transferred to Lord Yin, and he will truly become his confidant? See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3025. Bai Shan was beaten hard, pushed General Nai away and said, "This is a good opportunity to make a contribution, and the son of your immediate boss is also here, so your achievements here will not be buried." General Nai looked around and asked, "Young Master Yin is here too?" Bai Shan said, "He is not in the county office now, so he went out to ask, but it is the autumn harvest, and the Taoist priest is also going to the ground to cut rice, so he should be back soon." General Nai asked, "Yes, the county town is boring, and it is rare to come out. Naturally, I have to see the mountains and rivers outside. Wouldn't it be wonderful to visit the Taoist temples in the mountains?" If he wasn't the county magistrate, he would have followed along, and the mountains and forests must be cooler than the city, just in time to escape the summer. General Nai. Bai Shan is most concerned about the carriage in General Nai's team. What is there to see in General Nai? Everyone is acquaintances. What did they not see when they traveled west? So he quickly appeased General Nai, and walked towards the carriage with bright eyes. "Is Mr. Kui from the Ministry of Engineering in the carriage?" Kui Wei responded, but no one got out of the car. Bai Shan was a little puzzled. Just as he was about to speak, General Nai patted him on the shoulder from behind and said, "Where is the post station? Let the brothers sit down and rest for a while. What else can we say after we have eaten?" Bai Shan calmed down and responded with a smile, then turned around and said to the yeoman, "Go and tell Lord Zhou, and say that I have brought the generals and adults to the inn, and let her eat first, so she doesn't have to wait for me." General Nai's teeth were sour. Because the crown prince valued everyone in the salt field, the lion opened his mouth and asked the emperor directly for 1,000 people. Of course he knew that the emperor would not agree, so he allowed the emperor to cut down the number of people to 500. In addition to the 200 people who were the confidants of General Nai, another 300 people were selected from other military camps in Jiangxi. Naturally, it is impossible for the prince to say that they are veterans who play bachelors, but they are all soldiers with good ability. Of course, most of them are bachelors. Their task is to protect the salt pans, and they are all elite soldiers. General Nai only brought a dozen people into the city, and the rest were stationed outside the city. He was not here to fight, so there was no need to bring people into the city and cause Bai Shan trouble. General Nai glanced at the post station in Bihai County, tisk and shook his head. "Your post station in Bihai County is like the post station in the desert, and it's too small." Bai Shan did not deny this. He said, "We will build it after a while." General Nai was very skeptical. "Your county government is rich? By the way, although our military salaries are allocated by the Ministry of War, we can't keep up with it for a while, and your county government is responsible for the food and grass." He said, "I'm here with people, you can't let the soldiers go hungry." Bai Shan said, "Don't worry, he lacks everything now, except for money." Just as he was talking, the sound of vomiting in the backyard became louder. Bai Shan paused for a while, and couldn't bear it. He turned his head and asked General Nai, "Master Kui has always come here all the way?" General Nai also had a look of sympathy on his face. "The top was rushing, and the orders were hurried, so I couldn't help but walk faster on the road. In fact, Master Kui is also a good equestrian. He doesn't get dizzy when he rides. It's easy to get heat stroke in the sun." Between heat stroke and motion sickness, General Nai decisively chose to make Lord Kui motion sick, but he just vomited when he got out of the car. Bai Shan frowned slightly. "You really don't need to see the doctor." "No, Mr. Kui and the people who serve him have said that this is a common thing, and it's good to vomit. What else can happen when it's all over the place? Let's take a look." Mr. Kui took a lot of effort to invite him, and he asked the prince to work and transfer him, but baby, nothing can happen. Bai Shan called the yeoman, "Go back and invite Lord Zhou. No, please come over, Lord Wen. Manbao hasn't had morning sickness yet, but he doesn't dare to show her something disgusting." What if she sees someone vomiting and feels nauseous herself? But it was still Joe Man. The medicine box was carried by the cake, and the yaman smiled at Bai Shan. Master Wen is not in the medical office, so he went to pick up the medicinal materials. So Joe Man asked, "Where is Master Kui?" Bai Shan stretched out his finger to the backyard and held her temporarily. "You can take a look after Master Kui has been groomed. He would rather endure it and not get out of the car to see him. Obviously, he still has a little face." Now Joe Man went to look for him. Not only Joe Man was uncomfortable, but Mr. Kui was afraid that he would not be happy either. Joe Man waited downstairs. Master Kui knew that Joe Man was going to see a doctor. He got up with a pale face. After rinsing his mouth, he managed to suppress his nausea. "A bit. Master, why are you so tossing now? Let you go." Chinsui was helpless, knowing that the old man's problem of loving face had been committed again, so he could only help him to go back to the guest room first, and then let the people at the inn bring hot water up, and after he took a bath and changed clothes, he invited him down to invite someone. Joe Man waited and finished chatting with General Nai below. In fact, General Nai didn't know why he was sent to Qingzhou. The order they received was to listen to Bai Shan after arriving in Qingzhou. But he suspects that they are here to build the ferry, because Kui Wei is here to build the ferry. So when the three of them sat downstairs and talked about the old times, he asked, "Do you still dare to destroy the pier?" "I'm going to say that before, but I don't know how to build a pier." "Bai Shan, as long as you know how to farm." "It would, but..." General Nai looked at him suspiciously. "Are we here to settle the fields?" It made him a little scared. Bai Shan smiled and patted his shoulder. "Tomorrow I will take you to see it myself." General Nai clicked his tongue, turned to look at Zhou Mansi but smiled. "Master Zhou, we have so many soldiers stationed in Bihai County, I wonder if the medical office will send military doctors there." This year, a group of students graduated from the Imperial Physician Department, Wen Tiandong's group. After the selection of people in the Imperial Physician Hospital, the Imperial Physician Department and the local medical bureaus, generals who had experienced the Eastern Expedition began to write to rob people. After some games, there are not many generals who can grab people. Although Zhou Man was in Qingzhou, Xiao Yuanzheng and Imperial Physician Lu would also write to her to tell her about these matters, not to mention Zhou Liru. She looked at General Nai silently. "Now there are only 2 doctors in Qingzhou medical office, do you think it's possible?" General Nai couldn't help complaining, "Why don't you hire more doctors?" Zhou Man sighed and said, "Haven't you been to the county government office? The recruitment notices posted on the bulletin wall in front of the county government office have faded, but no one came to apply. What can I do? There are not many doctors in Qingzhou, and I don't know if the medical office does not pay enough money, or the doctors are too timid, and no one comes to apply anyway. See you at 10:30. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3026. Bai Shan finally followed Zhou Man and saw Kui Wei, a beautiful middle-aged man with very fair complexion, but it was a pity that his face was pale and haggard, and he didn't look very good. Not to mention Zhou Man, who likes to look at his face. Even Bai Shan could not help but take 2 steps forward and ask with concern, "Master Kui, are you all right?" Kui Wei's official position was equal to that of General Nai, below Zhou Man and above Bai Shan, but he had the same attitude towards the 3 of them. Zhou Man looked at his face, sat on the chair beside the bed. Zibing immediately took out the pulse pillow and gave it to her. Zhou Man touched Kui Wei's pulse, asked some more questions, then looked at his tangled face and said, "Master Kui, you seem to be unacceptable." Kui Wei didn't believe it. "As long as the carriage is fast, I will vomit when it bumps. Zhou Man asked him, do you vomit when you are near the capital? He said coldly, I ride horses in and out of the capital. He knew he was getting motion sickness, why didn't he want to drive? Zhou Man was curious, what if it rains? Kui Wei, there is a mink robe. He stared at Zhou Man and asked her to hold back the rest of her words. Zhou Man said, this is not simply motion sickness, there are also reasons for being unaccustomed to the soil and water. Of course, you may not have been unaccustomed to the soil and water before, but this time there must be a reason for this. Zhou Man prescribed medicine for him, should I give you 2 injections first? Let you feel better. Kui Wei hesitated for a moment, and finally accepted her kindness. Bai Shan was very generous to the talents who came to Bihai County, especially to Kui Wei and General Nai. He spent money to rent 2 courtyards in the county for the 2 of them to live. Of course, there may not be many opportunities for the 2 of them to live here, but if you rent it first, the rent is not expensive anyway. It's just that the house has not been cleaned up, so they temporarily stayed at the station. Zhou Man asked people to go back to the medical office to grab the medicine and deliver it, and gave Kui Wei a set of acupuncture. Although Kui Wei still didn't feel very well, he felt a little more comfortable than before, at least he didn't vomit anymore. He breathed a sigh of relief and said to Zhou Man Bai Shan, I'm sorry. The 2 of them naturally said it was fine. Kui Wei fell ill just after arriving in Bihai County, but he was used to it himself, basically it only took 2 or 3 days to be fine. So he didn't move away, he lived in the inn to recuperate, and Zhou Man went to see him every day. General Nai went to Jiawa with his 500 soldiers and Bai Shan. The first time he saw Yantian, he was stunned, especially now that both sides of Jiawa were opening salt fields. Piece after piece of watery salt fields spread, and a long-term worker walked around with a wooden shovel to shovel the salt to the edge of the field. General Nai. He grabbed a handful of salt and couldn't help but tasted it. After confirming that it was real salt, he poo-pooed twice, staring straight at the salt field where he couldn't see his head. For such a large salt field, only 500 of us can make it. Can you hold it? Bai Shan said, I still have 100 troops stationed here. He said, you also saw it when you came in. There is only one way to get to Dajiawa. There is the sea over there, and there is a mountain that is difficult to cross, so just keep the intersection. General Nai barely gained some confidence. Bai Shan reached out and patted his shoulder and said, so in addition to protecting the salt pans, you also have to settle the fields. General Nai looked left and right, looked around, and asked, I think there is very little farmland here. Where are we going to farm? Bai Shan pointed at Yantian and said, we will settle this field. General Nai. Bai Shan reassured him, don't worry, it won't be long like this. I'm already looking for someone. When I find enough people, you can free up your hands to train your troops. General Nai looked at him suspiciously, don't lie to me. I won't lie to you, Bai Shan said with a serious face, Qingzhou also has a garrison, and there are even a lot of people, but your majesty and the crown prince still deliberately transferred you from the capital. You should have guessed it by now. General Nai is not stupid, he naturally guessed it. He asked with a serious face, someone will take action against the salt field. Bai Shan nodded, so I will definitely let you train, don't worry, I won't occupy your people for a long time. It's just that at this time, everyone's salt field is not known to the real enemy. The most urgent task is to open up more salt fields and expose more salt. But they had to build barracks before they could open up the salt fields to dry the salt. Even as honest as General Nai, he couldn't help but say, Master Bai, you are a white wolf with empty gloves. How could it be a white wolf with empty gloves? Bai Shan pointed at the food in a warehouse and said, did you see that? I have prepared the military food for a long time, and I will send fresh vegetables and meat and eggs here every day. To be responsible for the food and drink of 500 more soldiers, the cost is still not small. Not only the villages near Dajiawa, but also the villages farther away are richer. More than 20 days before the arrival of the people, Bai Shan directly called the Li chiefs in the vicinity and asked them to spread the word, and asked the villagers to grow more vegetables and raise more livestock such as chickens, ducks, pigs, and sheep. At that time, the county government would meet. Come out to buy. Now chickens, ducks, pigs, and sheep will not increase immediately, but there are many more dishes. It would be enough to send 2 sheep or 2 pigs to everyone every day. But to be honest, this cost is indeed much larger, so Bai Shan needs people even more. He still has a lot of official land in his hands, plus the land confiscated from Daying village and Xiaojing village, and the land he bought from the Song family redemption. He now has no shortage of land to grow grain, vegetables, and livestock, and he doesn't even need it. Money is lacking in people. So he returned to the county office and called Kui Yuan again. How are things going? Kui Yuan, are you in such a hurry now? Didn't you say that after the autumn harvest is over, you will sneak people over? Bai Shan said, it's autumn harvest time, how many young people are you sure you can attract? He paused and said, you don't need young men, young ladies are also acceptable, and the county can accept it. It would be better if it were widows and solitary young men. Kui Yuan hesitated for a while, but nodded, don't worry, sir, I will try my best. He decided to go out and have a look tomorrow. Bai Shan is very generous, bring some copper coins, if not enough, ask me for it. Some of what Bai Shan said were 2 baskets full of copper plates, which were put on the car for Kui Yuan. It's not easy for people from the county government to come forward with robbing people, so Bai Shan gave the money, and Kui Yuan took the money and hired a few people. After tying the bamboo basket containing the copper coins and placing it on the ox cart, Kui Yuan and Bai Shan saluted, don't worry, Lord Lang, you will definitely live up to your trust. Bai Shan nodded in return. In fact, it was nothing if he couldn't finish it. The big deal was to sit down with Governor Guo and ask him for help, but Kui Yuan was so solemn. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3027. Old Man Yuan dragged a bamboo basket in the field, and occasionally bent over to pick up an ear of rice. Even if he took 10 steps, he could bend over once, but there were not many ears of rice that he could pick up. Who doesn't check roughly when they collect the rice? Therefore, there are not many ears of rice left for scavengers to pick up on a piece of land. Bend down, straighten up, bend down again, straighten up again. He probably feels tired too, so he just keeps hunching his back, so that the ups and downs of bending over and straightening up are not too big. It doesn't feel so uncomfortable, and it can save some money strength. After picking up a piece of land, he went to another field. Just as someone was harvesting nearby, he walked over, talked to people, and chatted by the way. Uncle Yuan, how many did you pick up today? Not much. Old Man Yuan found a place on the ridge to sit down, let people see the rice ears in his bamboo basket, and sighed, it's not a good day, everyone has kept it clean. The owner who was harvesting the rice said loudly, didn't the third and fourth go to Mr. Fang's house to cut rice? The old man Yuan said glumly, I went, but there are a lot of people going this year, so I earn 12 cents a day. That's a little bit. Fortunately, after 3 meals, the family can save a lot of food. The old man Yuan was even more unhappy. This year, Master Fang has invited a lot of people to his house, and it will be finished in a few days. Someone comforted him, after harvesting rice and planting wheat, you can always find work to do. The sun is getting bigger and bigger, and the owner of the harvest also decided to take a rest. The people in the nearby fields also stopped their movements one after another. They dropped their sickles and took water and dry food. Fortunately, the harvest is good this year, But where did Mr. Fang invite so many people? I think some of them are not near us. Oh, you don't know it yet. Before the Yamen raided the house, those people lost their land, and the servants were nowhere to be found, so why don't you have to come out and look for part-time workers? The servant was copied, isn't it still the servant? I heard that the newly arrived county magistrate has released a lot of servants. He didn't sell them anymore, but put them away for good people. Each person also allocated 2 or 3 acres of land. We don't have enough land ourselves, how can we give it to the servants? Someone took old man Yuan as an example, isn't old Uncle Yuan's house short of land? The old man Yuan quickly waved his hand and said, my family is divided into land, Sci, but the family is not good enough, because I sold a lot of land to see a doctor, so I can't make ends meet. So you can't get sick. I heard people say that there is a medical office built in Bihai County, and there is no money to see a doctor. Yes, I've heard it too. I've also heard people say that the state city and our county will be built in the future, and the lower households will not need money to see a doctor and get medicine, and the middle households will not need money to see a doctor. Real or fake? Of course it's true. This is still said by Mr. Zhao, who works at the chief's house. Bihai County, that's far away, right? Why is the medical office built there? We can still go there anyway. Where is Bihai County? Do you still have to go to the state city? I heard that it is not far from the state city. The order of the medical department is the wife of the magistrate's family in Bihai County, so it must be her husband's. I heard that Bihai County is very different now. There are fewer people there, and there are more jobs that can be done. In the past, it was 20 yuan a day, and you can find jobs at will. Old man Yuan couldn't help but pay attention. Really? Of course it's true, the man said. This news came from Lichhan's house, so there's still a lie. And if it's settled there, it can still be distributed. The old man Yuan swallowed his saliva and asked, can the land that has already been divided in the past be divided? Okay, as long as you don't have land, you can transfer your household registration. The old man Yuan thought about it. Oh, Uncle Yuan, you can let the third and fourth of your family try it out, both of them have sold the land under their names, haven't they? Just went to see, if you can divide the land, then your family will make a lot of money. Are you afraid that you won't be able to support yourself in the future? It's so easy to say, but it's really not easy to do. If you don't say anything else, will you be able to meet at home when you go to Bihai County? Do you know where Bihai County is? Most of the people here really don't know, they have been to the prefecture city as far away as possible, and most of them have been to the county seat and Bihai County, and they have only heard of it. Uncle Yuan dragged the bamboo basket home after sunset. He went out at sunrise. After a busy day, only 1/3 of the rice ears in the bamboo basket were filled. He put the bamboo basket under the eaves, and the eldest daughter-in-law came over to take a look. Without saying anything, she carried the rice ears out to dry in the yard, turned around and went into the kitchen to continue working. The old man Yuan asked, what about the third and fourth? The person in the kitchen responded, I don't know, I came back a long time ago, and I don't know where I went. The old man Yuan frowned and was about to speak when his 2 sons came back from outside laughing and laughing. Washed the clothes too? Yuan Laohan glanced at the clothes hanging in the yard, only to realize that there were no clothes on them. Obviously, the old family and the second family did not wash their clothes. The old man Yuan sighed and made up his mind. After the 2 sons had finished drying their clothes, he said, come with me, I have something to tell you. People in the kitchen probably heard the sound of chopping vegetables a little louder. Yuan Sanlang and Yuan Chilang didn't care either and followed his father out to talk. But they couldn't help but be surprised. Go to Bihai County? Yes, said the old man Yuan, if the trees are moved to death, and the people are moved to live, our family can't be moved now. In March and April this year, the food at home will not be able to be picked up. This year, after the tax is paid, we have to pay it back. I borrowed the food from your uncle and your uncle's house before, and there is less left, and it will be more difficult every year if this goes on. Yuan Sanlang and Yuan Shilang looked very ugly, and interrupted him, "Father, the land that my family sold me and the fourth child was for my mother's treatment, the eldest brother and the second brother also have to take out a share, we can't sell us. We will be driven out of the land." "It's not to drive out," Yuan old man looked at the two of them with sadness and helplessness, "you two go, I will definitely give you food and money, and the things in the family will be divided. Your eldest brother and second brother take advantage of the field, the others give you more things." "I don't agree," Yuan Shilang shouted, holding his neck, "even if the family is divided, it's okay to have more eldest brother Tian, but we can't live without it, right? It was agreed at the beginning that the land would be sold to us, but the eldest brother and the second brothers. We also have a share. I can't live." Yuan old man couldn't help but stretched out his hand to pat them, and said sadly and angry, "If the rest of the land is divided, it is better not to divide the family, just the 2 acres of land, you can support yourself, can I marry a wife and go to the military? I asked you to go to Bihai County, and it's not that the family will be separated immediately," he said calmly, "go and see first. Working part-time, or coming home during the Chinese New Year and holidays, it should be yours or yours. See you at 7 p.m.